Hey YouTube, Andrew here. As you can tell, I'm not doing a review of any kind today. Simon, aka Diansis on YouTube, posted a video about his memories of 9/11, and I'm going to do something very similar. Because of time right now, I'm actually going to be showing you what I wanted to show you after I told you what I remembered. But we're running a little late, so instead what I'm going to do is, here in Marshfield, they are doing a 9/11 dedication ceremony with a piece of the Twin Towers coming to Marshfield, and we're going to be going to that, and I'm going to attempt to get you guys some footage, and afterwards I'll come back and I'll tell you, what I remember and how it, has affected me, really. So, here's that footage right now.
I would like to ask you to, for a moment, close your eyes and reflect upon the tragic events that occurred over about 10 years today, obviously today, throughout the country, not only in Washington, D.C., but New York City and Pennsylvania. On behalf of the Marshfield Fire and Rescue Department, it's my pleasure today to welcome you, a privilege to welcome you today to the 10th anniversary memorial ceremony of the events on 9/11, but also to unveil a piece of history that we now have on display here at the Marshfield Fire and Rescue Department. Following this ceremony, we invite all to take a look at that piece of history, and you can get to be looked. It can be found through this hallway over here. Once you get past the refreshment area, there's little yellow arrows on the floor that will identify and direct you directly past that piece of history, as well as the route to exit the fire station. So I encourage and invite everyone to take advantage of that opportunity to, again, we want you to be able to touch a piece of history right here in Marshfield, Wisconsin.
Directly over my building, and there's been another collision. Can you see it?
Yes. 8:42, a plane crashed into the right-hand tower of the World Trade Center, somewhere about 3/4 of the way up. You can see the smoke billowing from that part of the building. And then about 18 or 20 minutes later, a second plane, a large plane, we saw it actually on tape, hit the left-hand tower of the World Trade Center about halfway up. An enormous fireball on several sides of the building. People trying to be evacuated. There's the tape of the second plane hitting right there, even as people were trying to get out of the first building. We have confirmed reports now that there was one plane hijacked, American Airlines Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles, and that is apparently one of the planes used in this crash.
The FAA has banned all takeoffs at all airports across America. This country, in terms of air travel, has been immobilized. A good portion of the nation's capital, the most powerful center in the world,
extremely dangerous place to be. Heavy, dense, black smoke choking the firefighters down there. Very little they can do to save these buildings.
This is just a horrific scene and a horrific moment.
Down West Broadway, into that plume of smoke, that was where those World Trade Centers once stood. And you can see people...
You can see them literally having to drag each other up the street. There's an incredible amount of panic down here in downtown Manhattan. People are realizing they really need to leave the area.
Didn't know what happened, and we looked out the window, and there was just debris and papers, like a ticker tape parade, falling from the sky. And immediately, everybody calmly walked downstairs.
And I pulled a woman underneath a truck because all that debris was falling down then. And now they both collapsed. There's no more World Trade Centers.
And then the cop was like, run, run. She saved my life. I mean, everyone was just in horrible place. You couldn't see. Everyone was hurt. I was so moved.
They turned in tonight for about 2 or 3 minutes. Took an inventory of myself and our focus now has to be on saving as many lives as possible.
There's an irony. This is a TV studio, and it looks just like if you ever saw the show Mask, where it's just a big open room, lots of tables, lots of ID stands, lots of lights, and they're going to treat people as best they can, stabilize them, then get them to trauma centers if they are stable. Do whatever they can to help them. There's going to be another section for the walking wounded.
The loss of life in New York City is utterly unbelievable.
I know that there's great concern over what the numbers of people lost are. We don't know the answer to that. The dimension will be very large. In terms of the people we're looking for, it's a couple of hundred firefighters and police officers, which is a staggering number. As far as the number of people in the building, that'll be in the thousands. But there's no way of knowing at this point, and we're going to keep praying, hoping that we save as many people as possible.
I remember standing in Grand Central and watching a man and a woman just scream and embrace each other and feel relief. I felt their relief to see each other again.
Katie, I don't want to alarm anybody right now, but apparently it felt just a few moments ago like there was an explosion of some kind here at the Pentagon. I hear no sirens going off in the building. I see no smoke. But the building shook for just a couple of seconds, the windows rattled, and security personnel are doing what they can momentarily to clear this part of the building.
He said, I called you from the plane. He just said, I want to let you all know that I love you very, very much. That the plane has been taken over by hijackers.
Today, America has experienced one of the greatest tragedies ever witnessed on our soil. These heinous acts of violence are an assault on the security of our nation. They're an assault on the security and the freedom of every American citizen. We will not tolerate such acts. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a difficult moment for America. Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence.
This morning, my children and I were watching some of the memorial services on TV. I'm sure many of you did as well. My daughter Grace, who's taking pictures right now, asked me what this was all about. Grace is only 8 years old, and even though 9/11 seemed to have happened in the recent past, she wasn't alive back then. And so we talked a little bit about what happened on September 11, 2001. And as I talked to her, I was kind of taken back to when I was about 8 years old in my great-grandmother's kitchen. It was in December, and I had asked her about this Pearl Harbor thing that we learned about at school. And I remember watching my great-grandma trying to explain That day, each of us stood someplace. We watched the events happen on TV, we read about them on articles posted online, and we listened to the radio. I myself stood in the hall at the University of Wisconsin Marshfield County campus in Marshfield and watched a handful of my colleagues as we initially discussed the one plane that hit the first North Tower. After discussing how a small plane, which is what people thought had happened, could hit a building on such a clear day, we saw the attack the second. And from that point on, I don't remember any conversation. For over an hour, we stood and watched as we heard about the impact of the Pentagon, as we saw the power falls. Some people walked away, some people cried. Most of us stared because we didn't know how to comprehend what it is, what was it that we were seeing. When I was explaining to Grace today, I felt the same way 10 years later. It's still difficult for us to express what that meant to us that day, what it meant to watch. I think a lot of us felt for the first time in our lives unsafe. Something that we normally don't feel. We feel safe. We feel safe in our homes. We feel safe in our country. But that day, we realized that we weren't as safe as maybe we thought we were. Ironically, my great-grandmother's birthday is September 11th. She was 102 years old. And the one thing I take from her is that the story of Pearl Harbor, not the facts, not the details of what happened at Pearl Harbor, but I could see what it meant to her. I could see that it was something that many, many years later, as she was describing it to me, still very much affected her. So, what can we do? What can I do to my daughter who wants to know what this 9/11 thing is all about? I can talk to her about the facts, but more importantly, I can try to in some way express what it meant to me. I can bring her to the Marshfield Fire Department, and I can take her to this piece of history that we'll all see later today. She can touch it, she can feel it, she can see it, and know what it meant to have buildings of that size come down. This is a piece of history that's here for all of us to experience and be part of. And every day as the firefighters in the city of Marshfield and other protective service employees in the city of Marshfield see this piece of history, they're reminded, like they are every day, of the inherent danger of their work. And we're reminded of the inherent danger of their work. And the risks they take every day to protect us from whatever might happen. I don't know what to tell people about what I feel. I don't think anybody can talk about what they feel and fully express what they feel. I hope that today we take the opportunity to remember to explain to children who are here, and there's a lot of kids who weren't around during 9/11, who learned about the history of 9/11, to talk to them about what it means, to show them a piece of the World Trade Center that we have here at the Marshfield Fire Department, so that we can make good on the promise that I know every one of us has made over and over the last 10 years, and that is to never forget. Because we will never forget. But in order to make sure that that is carried on, we need to teach our children about what happened that day. Thank you.
Detail, prepare to retrieve colors. Retrieve colors. Two. Detail. Right, mid. And a half set. Forward, look. Left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left.
In closing,
So we got a piece of the Trade Center right here.
The sayings above it too.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, we couldn't get that close when we were down there. Thank you.
And so that was the ceremony. I do have to apologize. I wasn't able to focus very long on the I-beam as I wanted to. Now that I-beam was from one of the two towers. We're not sure which. It was just found in the rubble on Ground Zero. I would have tried to stay longer, but there was a moving line of all the people, and we got the ability to touch it, and I think I captured that on video. And then we just had to move on. So, but that was, yeah, it was a powerful ceremony. I won't post all of the footage I captured because the ceremony was an hour and a half, and I caught about 30 minutes of it. So I will be putting all of the footage onto a different video that I'll be linking down in the description. But I'll be picking out snippets and different things that I found very interesting about the ceremony and kind of evoked what I remembered about it, which brings me on to my next part, where describing what I remember. Now, it was Tuesday, a regular old Tuesday. The fact that it was the fact that the first month was 9 and 11 I never crossed my mind. None of all these things that I've figured out later on in life, never occurred to my head, such as terrorism. Terrorism was a concept that I don't remember ever being introduced before, using the terror as a form of a weapon to attack people with. All these things, they've brought to the foreground and have informed me as a person on all these different ideals, and it's kind of a twisted thing that, this has helped inform me, but it's done so in such a negative way. But moving on, what I remember, I was in between classes. This was in grade school at Washington Elementary, and I was going to a class to ask a teacher a question. I honestly don't remember what the question was, but I walked in. Her name was Mrs. Clark, and a colleague of hers was also in the room with her, which was odd, but I, just was about to ask her a question when I noticed they were both listening to the radio. And Mrs. Clark was crying. She was going, oh my God, the Pentagon. And I asked, what? And then the radio was talking about how a plane hit the Pentagon. Now, my first thought was, this was an accident. This was a plane malfunction, some kind of mechanical malfunction that caused the plane to go down, and unfortunately it hit the Pentagon. And then they started talking about two towers. What I remember them saying was two towers. I'm sure they said twin towers, but I didn't understand that at the time. I didn't know what the twin towers were. I didn't know what the World Trade Center was. I was 12, I think. It must have been 12, yeah. 10 years ago. And, no, I'd be 11 then. So, and I remember asking, what exactly, and then they, just shoved me off the class and said, go to your next class, and we really didn't talk about it that day. We didn't talk about, it was a regular school day after that, if I remember correctly. I don't remember, that moment of me going in and hearing about the Pentagon is burned in my mind, but the rest of the day seems like a blur because I believe we just went on as normal. Nobody mentioning anything. The school, I think there might have been an announcement, but I can't recall 100%, but we never, I've seen, recounts, people watching on TV in classes, and we didn't have TVs at our school, we were a poor school, but, we had radios, and I'm sure that's why we didn't have much coverage during school, because we couldn't get accurate details at the time. So, we went on with school, and I got home, and Mom was crying. And that's when I learned, about the Twin Towers, and saw the footage of the second plane crashing into the second tower, of the smoldering wreckage, and of that iconic image of people running with the smoke cloud closely following them. All these different images. And, I mean, it was just such an incredibly emotional event. I remember crying at points. Because even though I didn't know these people, I realized that this was, that hundreds of people were being killed, or were killed rather, and that took a toll on me, because I'd never seen that kind of I hadn't been alive for any kind of war, and being an 11-year-old child, hearing all these events, hearing all these retellings of people being on the top of seeing people jump out of the building as a way to save themselves, even though, it was incredible. I guess that's the best way to put it. Not in a good way, And I remember I was in the crossing patrol, and we had a little sash that we wore with a little badge, and I remember wearing that around the house for days afterwards, trying to, because I obviously couldn't go down and help, but trying to feel as a part of that community that was part of this event. I wanted to, show my solidarity, and the best way I could, being an 11-year-old child, was to wear this badge and, put my hopes and prayers out, that more people would be found and saved. So, that's what I recall. And, 10 years after the fact, we finally gotten the leader. We're taking down the terror organization. I still don't know how I feel, how I stand on the events that have taken place since, the Iraq War, the war on terrorism, certainly the war on terrorism, but, everything, we were out for blood as Americans. We were out for blood after this vicious attack on us. And we did things rashly. I'll admit that. We as Americans, we wanted retribution. We were, as Bush, we were on a crusade to say. And looking back on it, I just don't know if that was the right way to go about it. Obviously we had a right to be mad, but all the different persecutions that we set on people, the way we almost became insulated, how we became, everybody stay out, they're bad, people are going to hurt us, and, how it seemed like we were just going to become, like, this isolated country, that we didn't want it just was so bizarre. And I remember, TV shows just not happening, News was, for what I can recall, seemed like it was 24/7. That was all that was being shown. I mean, I remember, I think it was Letterman who was the first person to come back on, you know, a late show, and that was at least a week, if not later, if I remember correctly. You know, the first live, you know, taping was taking place, you know, weeks afterwards. So, but as I said, yes, we as Americans could have handled that situation better, but what's done is done, I guess. So, I'm going to now edit this. Hopefully it won't take too much longer. One good thing that will be happening today, you know, besides the one thing I should say that's this, I should rephrase that. In my life now, this day will not always be remembered as a sad day. I'm currently dating a girl who was actually born on September 11th. So, it's kind of a bittersweet day now, because I'm able to celebrate with her. This will be our first, you know, birthday with her. This is between us. So, you know, I'll be able to not always feel sorrow or darkness about this day now. And I don't think I could have done that, you know, 10 years ago. If I had been dating someone who was born on September, I think I would have just broke down and cry, because it was just the sadness that went along with this day for years afterwards. And we're finally starting to get to the point where, you know, saying September 11th or 9/11 doesn't just, you know, bring people to tears. And I think that's a good thing. Obviously, we should never, or will never, forget what happened on this horrible, horrible day 10 years ago. But we as a country, and we as a world community, have come together, and I think that's great. You know, we have people from the UK who are starting this, who are talking about what happened, and I think that's great. That isn't just Americans, that it's the world as a whole, which are coming together on this day. And I think that says something. You know, that this horrible, horrible tragedy has brought the world closer. And while I wish it could have obviously came as out of another method, I think that it's great that we are finally, you know, getting closer as a community of the world. So, this is Andrew signing off, and hopefully later next week I'll have some lighter material for you guys. So, night.